Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into the 5 creepiest, spookiest, and most inexplicable supernatural experiences. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get started. I don't believe in ghosts, but I swear I grew up in a haunted house. It was a 1950s Rambler of all things. The people who built the place had a mentally disabled son who died in the house in his 40s, but he was mentally like a third grader, basically a child. We also know that the house was on the market a long time before my parents bought it. I've heard, but haven't confirmed, that when it finally sold, the family that moved in lived there for less than a year and then put the house back on the market for a steal. My parents snapped it up and lived there for close to 30 years. Growing up in the house, it was like the shadows were always moving. Some were aggressive, some were not, but one shadow showed up time and time again, a shadow of what seemed to me to be a rather large man. He wasn't that tall, maybe 5'8", but he was thick. I'm a big comic book fan, and he reminded me of a disheveled kingpin. That shadow was a troublemaker. He would stand outside the bathroom door and lunge at you as you exited. If you were carrying a hot pan from the stove to the sink or the oven to the dining room, he would lunge at you like he was going to knock the pan out of your hands. In the yard, he would hide around a mimosa tree and lunge at you while you were mowing the lawn. One time I was so startled that I jumped off the riding mower and tripped. The mower had a butt sensor and stopped immediately, thank goodness. After that, I mowed that area with a push mower. He would spook me in the shower at night when I was trying to sleep, and if I was home alone watching television. In this house, we had a game room that was a nicely converted garage. My sister was scared of that room and wouldn't go in there at night without someone with her. Strange stuff happened in that room. The lights would turn on for no reason. The television in there would turn on. There were 2 closets in there, both with double bifold doors. The doors would fling open and stuff would hurl out of the closet. The door to the game room was oriented so that you could see from the doorway into the sitting area of the living room, where we mostly watched TV. We usually kept this door completely shut, but sometimes we would hear jiggling on the doorknob, and the door would open just a sliver, like someone was watching us from the other room. One time my sister brought home her boyfriend from college, and he slept on the couch in the living room. He said that in the middle of the night, he heard the door to the game room open, stuff being moved around in the dark, and the light to the game room come on. He sat up in a panic, just in time to see a chair move, one of the closet doors open on its own, and a couple of piles of sewing fabric get thrown on the floor. My mother has been a lifelong fabric collector. She used to be a pretty good seamstress. The guy was scared half to death, refused to sleep in the house again, and broke up with my sister soon after. We all got an uneasy chuckle out of the whole thing. That was over 15 years ago, probably closer to 20 years now. My sisters and I are grown with our own kids, and we all live a long way from that house. I barely think about the stuff I saw growing up there. A few years ago, though, my sister was visiting our parents, who only moved out of the house recently with her son and 2 daughters. Her oldest daughter suddenly started. My sister asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Mommy, why does that man like to scare me?" "What man, honey?" "The man who likes to stand outside of the bathroom door." It was around 10 on a Friday night, and my roommates had already turned in. I had a couple of beers and was feeling bored, so I decided to take a walk to the bay and smoke a joint. The spot I wanted to go to was about a 2-mile walk from my house. There's a pathway at the end of my street that follows a long stream, a runoff from the bay. When you round the corner at the end of the path, there's a boat club that was having a party with a live band. Anyway, I walked all the way to my spot, smoked the joint, and began making my way back. As I came around the corner of the boat club, it looked like the party was wrapping up, and most people were heading home. I noticed a man tucked behind the fence of the club, trying to take hits from a bowl. He called out, asking if I had a lighter. Feeling in a good mood, I said, "Sure," and offered it to him for a couple of hits. He offered me a hit, which I politely declined as I was already feeling good. He thanked me and handed the lighter back. As I turned to leave, I saw that he was walking alongside me down the path. I said, "Oh, I'm heading home, man. I'm tired." "Yeah, I'm heading the same way. This path can be dangerous at night." He started talking about how he was from NYC to prove he was tough and familiar with sketchy environments. At this point, I was getting really weird vibes from this guy, and my adrenaline was pumping. I said, "You know what? I think I'd really prefer to walk by myself. I live around here, and I'm not worried about my protection." The guy started asking questions about where I lived. I told him I wasn't going to tell him since I had just met him, but he was pretty persistent. He insisted we walk together for both our sakes. He mentioned I looked like I knew a fighting style. "What are you, a brown belt or a black belt?" In my head, I thought he was sizing me up for toughness as we walked deeper into the dark part of the path. He talked about his fighting experience and said he had earned a pretty high belt himself. We rounded a corner near the water, and he asked if I had any kids. I responded no, and he insisted I walk a few paces ahead of him since he had kids and had more to lose. I was really freaked out at this point, but wanted this to be over with. He seemed too drunk to be able to take me. I walked ahead of him, but kept looking back every few seconds to make sure he didn't try anything. I told him he was really sketching me out and should watch himself. We were approaching an overpass where the path dips below a busy street. He said, "Okay. When we get to this point up here, I'm going to go right and you're going to go left. But that's not going to be the last time we see each other. I'll see you 2 days from now. There's something you'll have to do for me before that time. You won't know it till it happens, but you'll know it when it does." As we talked, he probably noticed I was on edge and constantly looking behind myself. He said, "I can tell. You see them following you too, don't you?" Eventually, we reached the overpass, and he veered off up to the street above. As soon as I was out of sight under the road, I picked up my flip-flops and sprinted the remaining half-mile to my house, locking the door behind me. My family lived in a very haunted house growing up. Most of the time, whatever was there just wanted to scare us. They never touched us or caused harm. My siblings and even family friends could name each weird thing in every room. Multiple people would see or interact with the same odd things in the same places. But then there was Shadow Dad, as we called him. My brother saw him first. He was going to the restroom in the middle of the night, and when he came out to go down the hall to his room, he heard something running for him from behind. He took off, sprinting into his room and bolting up the ladder of his high bunk bed. The thing grabbed his ankle and tried to yank him down. My brother, screaming bloody murder, kicked and flailed but made it up. Looking back down, he saw our dad, but pitch black. His arms were a little longer and his hands looked wrong. Then Shadow Dad walked away. My little sister was, as we joke, a demon as a kid. At 4 years old, she was not afraid of the dark, of being alone, or of going into the basement. She would regularly disappear for hours, and when asked where she went, she would reply that she was playing with her friends in the basement. They only come out when the lights are off. Horrifying, right? She was the kid who would walk to get water at midnight without turning on lights or even running up the stairs. She would say terrifying things about her friends in the basement, like the long horse lady. But one day, she wouldn't go anywhere alone. She had to turn on every light. She wouldn't go to sleep without someone with her. She would cry when she needed something at night. When we asked her what happened, all she would say was, "Shadow Dad got me." I asked her a few weeks ago if she remembered, and she told me she remembered loving her friends and then one day being afraid. She remembered Shadow Dad chasing her. She thinks he got her, but she doesn't have a clear memory. Whatever Shadow Dad did, or whatever happened, it changed her forever. When I was 4 years old, my grandpa, my mom's dad, passed away from lung cancer in his sleep. That night, I had a very vivid dream where he took me on a trip in a hot air balloon. At the end of our trip, he said goodbye and floated up into heaven in the balloon. The next morning, I immediately told my mom about the dream. She was on the phone, just having received the news of her dad's death. She dropped the phone and looked at me, her face white as a sheet. To this day, we're both convinced that my grandpa visited me one last time to say goodbye. I had a similar experience when my other grandpa died 10 years ago. The night after his funeral, I cried myself to sleep, struggling to cope with his death. In the middle of the night, I woke up because someone was calling my name loudly. There was no one in my room. It was pitch dark. Then I heard the voice again, and it sounded like my grandpa. He was calling me. Suddenly, a car drove by, and its lights rushed through the half-closed blinds on the windows, partially blinding me for a second. Then I saw a pale figure in the corner next to my bed. I got really scared, closed my eyes, and heard my name again like an echo. When I opened my eyes again, the pale figure was gone. I'm convinced this was my grandpa saying goodbye and reassuring me that he'd still be around somehow. Until a couple of years ago, I could feel his presence when I visited his grave, like a warm wave gently passing through my body. I used to live in Okinawa, Japan as a kid, which is an incredibly haunted place. One day my mother took me and my friend to a park that had this huge stone slide on the side of a hill. We were the only ones at the park, so my friend and I were just being goofy and playing around. Then we decided to play hide and seek. I volunteered to be the seeker and started to count. I reached 20 and spun around to see if I could spot him really quickly, and sure enough, I saw him in the area at the top of the slide. I made my way over and tried to be stealthy as I climbed, so as not to alert him that I was coming. I reached the top, screaming, "I found you," but nobody was there. He definitely hadn't gone down the slide, as I would have seen him do so. It was then that I saw him on the other side of the park, and I was confused as to what had just happened. I was overcome by a strange feeling because I knew I saw something up there, and there was nobody else around. I slid down the slide and caught him. I asked him if he was ever hiding at the top of the slide, to which he replied, "No." We played for a bit more before it was time to go, but I never went back up to the top of the slide.